Thank you for watching the Whittemore Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook with your host Edward McQueen and April Garner.
Good afternoon, good evening. We're at our new time today, 7 o'clock p.m., and that will be our continuing time from now on until further notice. I'm your co-host, Ed McQueen.
You're the what?
She called me the host. All right, I'll be the host. That's my co-host.
He'll get it right one day.
We've got a good field of discussion ahead of us today. And it's a very important discussion in light of today's the events that are happening in the past 3 or 4 weeks. And as you all can see, who our guests are. So as usual, we would be remiss if we don't kick it off by sending our condolences and our well wishes out to our sick and shut in. And usually it's around the immediate community of Horry County and the PD area. But since we're worldwide, we just say for everybody, but especially for people out there alphabetically in Allentown and Demeanor. Gonna need some help from you guys, all right? Come on.
The Allsbrook community.
Yeah.
Bayboro. Yeah. Burgess. Bucksport. Bucksville. Yeah. All right. I'm trying to do alphabetical order, Brother Edward. You're all over the place.
Yeah, but stay out of alphabetical order. I see y'all can help me here, okay? We have to Paula's Island, Merle's Inlet,
Georgetown, Poplar, Wampee, Longs, Loris.
Oh yeah,
Binkley, Green Sea,
North Myrtle Beach,
Little River,
Big River.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, then let's come into Conway. There you go, Conway.
What did
Sand Ridge community. He said Conway.
Oh, is it? Oh yeah. We'll come back to the capital of Conway in a few seconds here.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. Say the best for last. Capital of Conway.
Marion, South Carolina. Green Sea, Loris, the mighty city of Loris out there. Mm-hmm. Hemingway.
Yeah.
From that point, Charleston, Washington, D.C., all of our people who are listening, and we've got a lot of avid viewers. We're glad of that. So,
yeah, Virginia, North Carolina, Texas, Florida. Yeah. All
over the continental U.S. and beyond. So we are happy to have our guest today. And as I mentioned earlier about the discussion, and we're going to give our audience, our viewing audience, the opportunity to join in and type in any questions by way of the Facebook. By the way, you can also get this on our website. Is that correct, April? WCMagazine.net. You can go
the rebroadcast will be on the website. Yeah. The rebroadcast.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we'll begin. We have Chief Joseph Hill. He is the Horry County Police Chief, and our Conway Police Chief, Chief Dale Long, two of PD's finest. I'm going to say it like that, right? Two
Grand Strand and PD. Grand Strand and
PD. We're going to get those. The others are pretty soon. Because we want to have a broad discussion and a number of representatives from our law enforcement area. So we'll start with April. You want me to start with some questions for our guests, or?
Well, I think we should let our guests say hello to our viewers. And I mean, we've introduced them, but they may want to just say a couple of things just so they can, warm up their vocal cords a little bit, before this discussion. So why don't we start in alphabetical order? How about you, Chief Hill?
Hey, good evening. Thank you for having us. Thank you for giving law enforcement in the PD region a voice.
Awesome. Okay. And Chief Long?
I concur that under the times and the situations that we are, we appreciate being able to speak and to share and to interact with the community in any way, in any form possible. So thank you for this.
Yeah, and we want to have this opportunity for everyone to be, especially from our law enforcement area, to be to discuss any proactive strategies that that's been developed in light of this situation and the unrest in our country regarding police relations in our country. So I could start with the question, unless someone else will say anything, regarding the most controversial situation regarding the death of Mr. George Floyd and other incidences like that. I have question number one, that how would you have your officers handle situation differently? So we can start with either one of you, it doesn't matter.
Well, if you're talking about how we would handle a situation of a physical arrest, we have very strict guidelines and policies and practices that you use enough force to effect a lawful arrest. And I wasn't there that day. There's been universal condemnation of the actions of that officers and the officers that supported the officer on that day. But what I can tell you is we train our officers to use limited force, just enough force to effect a lawful arrest. I didn't see Mr. Floyd struggling. When the video was shown worldwide, there were actually 2 or 3 different angles. Again, I don't really want to comment a whole lot on that whole entire incident because I'm not privy to the facts of the case. But what I can tell you is we don't train our officers to do what you saw in that video that day.
Okay, Chief Long, you want to concur with?
I will concur there as well that, within the realms of how we train, there was no technique that we saw that was memorialized on that video that we teach, that we train on, that we utilize. We have went back through policies just to make sure that we don't have any ambiguous language in there. So we've been very certain that we teach our officers that they do not use any type of vascular neck restraint, anything like that that could impede that airflow or blood flow. We don't teach it. We don't train on it. We don't use it. So, within the state of South Carolina, that's just not any type of tactic that is handed down to us through our academy, even lower. There's one kind of a modified thing that they have taught up there before, but I don't even know if that's on their books anymore, called a shoulder pin. But we don't teach that. We don't utilize that. So what you saw there is not anything that we teach or use here.
So, of course, we know that situation in Minneapolis is definitely the catalyst for why we're having this discussion today. And there's a myriad of questions that have come up in the community. A lot of them, of course, are driven by the emotion that probably has kind of bottlenecked and festered in people after years of seeing so many similar instances happen with law enforcement and citizens who appear to be either, law-abiding, not really doing anything, or minor incidences that occurred that did not call for excessive use of force. So, one question that I have, considering the fact that both of you just stated that you've watched video and you've probably, had some discussions within your departments, but, what types of discussions have you had with your officers, and what were their reactions and perspectives after seeing the video and I guess looking at what you consider as the factual information at this point?
I don't think you'll find any officer anywhere that is going to condone anything that they saw. Everything that I've been hearing are words of condemnation of how that was very wrong. It was horrible. It was painful to watch. It was just as bad as it could be. And that is the sentiment that we have, is that we're looking at those officers at why would they do something so reckless and so criminal? I mean, that's just the lack of their concern for the well-being of Mr. Floyd there. So those are the discussions that we're having here, and then also stressing Number one, again, that within our policy, within our training, we do not utilize any type of hold like that. And then secondly is to reiterate that there is also a portion in there that says you have a duty to intervene and to act and to take action if you see another officer that is engaged in something that is excessive or even crossing the line into being a criminal act. They have a duty to act.
Now, do they get penalized for not following that duty in an event like that?
Certainly.
I mean, you have that duty to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, it depends on what we're talking about, but in the scope of what happened here, the officers here who had a duty to act that did not have been held criminally responsible. And I believe that would be the same case here. If we had an officer that was doing something that was illegal, that was criminal, and other officers witnessed that and did not intervene and did not do anything, they become, somewhat of a party to that incident. And I believe they would be charged here as well. So yes, there is a punitive part of not acting when you have a duty to act.
I concur with what Chief Long said. And, there's a lot of information is going to come out on this particular incident. What I have heard, which I haven't confirmed, is that several of those officers, 2 or 3, they were there to assist that day, were rookie officers. And what I mean by that is they had been on the job less than 4 or 5 days. So they were actually being trained by that senior officer who we saw in the video. And so that discussion is a new police officer, not really acclimated to the culture, scared every day that they're out there because they're brand new and they're learning, what would have been the actions if that had been you 25, 30, 40 years ago, however long you've been policing. So those discussions are going on as well. Yes. But what we do for our officers, and I'm sure that Chief Long is the same way, is that we reiterate, you have a duty to render aid.
Yes.
You have a duty to act when you see a criminal violation or your officer is practicing a misconduct. And that would be excessive use of force, failure to act. And it goes beyond just intervening at the scene. You have to tell somebody once you see that. And once you've made that scene safe. So those officers are compelled to identify a supervisor, communicate that concern to a supervisor, and from there, we'll take it through a disciplinary chain.
We also have a duty to report. It's not just a duty to act and intervene, but there is a duty to report that as an after part, as well as what Chief Hill said.
Okay. So why do you think that a culture of standing back and just letting it happen, why do you think that's kind of perpetuated itself within law enforcement? Because there are many perceptions about the code, and the code appears to be that law enforcement, they are their brother's keepers. They will not intervene when other officers are doing things that are out of line. And I think that's what we see typically in media whenever incidents like this happen across the country. And, of course, I can't speak on what happens here in the local area because we don't really see that in the local area, but we see it sensationalized or we see it depicted across the country. And I think it's something that's going to be difficult for police departments to overcome as far as any perceptions or even misconceptions of police actions or reactions in certain situations. So, why do you think that culture appears to perpetuate itself? Because it's happening way too much for it just to be, for us to just dismiss it as occurrences that are random. If there are policies in place where officers should know that they should intervene when excessive force is used, then why isn't it happening? Do you think that's just from a departmental standpoint, or is there really a culture for that?
Where do you start? Part of the issue that I see is the total lack of accountability. And if we start on our state level, our governing board is our Criminal Justice Academy. And they are the ones that hold my certification and say that I can police. That is something that they bestow upon me. And then I'm able to get out with the law enforcement powers that are vested in me by the city of Conway. For too long, the misconduct, reporting, and parts of it have been slow to catch up. had been slow to stay a little bit more modernized. And there was too much of a culture where officers were just kind of allowed to move along somewhere else, be somebody else's problem, instead of somebody putting their foot down and saying, you will not be certified by this state governing board. Now, I'm not throwing anything at the academy saying that this was an issue for them. Mm-hmm. They needed to strengthen it because it was chiefs and sheriffs that were allowing this to happen on the smaller level. So once there is the strengthening now, the professionalizing of what we do to where we have this higher accountability, we're going to see this start to erode even more and more in our state as we have a stronger process to be able to identify problem officers and to get them out of this profession before they can do any more harm.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can offer something else, you know, I was policing. I was a 2-year rookie in Virginia when Rodney King occurred in 1992, I believe it was. And that was a lesson that was taught to us. And see, law enforcement go through a transformative phase every few years. Yeah. We're constantly updating our policies and our training to deal with the current threat and the current environment. And after Rodney King, that was the battle cry. Hey, if you allow your fellow officer to do something wrong, you're just as culpable. Yes. So I've seen many times officer intervene when an officer is involved in a pursuit or a fight and their adrenaline level is flowing. I've seen officers pull other officers off a suspect or redirect that energy. We saw it recently. I think we saw it in Seattle. If you remember the footage, and they didn't show it a whole lot, and I'm a little disappointed in that, but there was a protester who was taken down, and the officer had his knee on the shoulder blade and on the lower back. It slipped onto the neck. Yeah, and the tactical officer next to him patted him on the leg, was like, hey, move your knee. That's the kind of action we're looking for out there. And it happens all the time, but, you know, that's not something that's reported in the media because it's not news. Mm-hmm. So I take exception to the blue culture of silence happening all the time or all over the place. That's right. Doesn't. It does happen. Yes, it does. But it's not prevalent in our profession. But those high-profile cases come out. And a lot of the high-profile cases deal with a single officer engaging a suspect incorrectly. So there's no other officer around to redirect that energy. And, you know, we just have to look at the totality of our engagements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So as part of this, the actions of the officers, I just want to get on the issue of the use of pepper spray and taser. Yeah. Or I'm sure you have control measures in place, but can you kind of elaborate on what control measures you have in order to make sure that these articles like pepper spray and taser are used appropriately and not abused?
Before pepper spray, I policed before it was pepper spray. It was CS. It was a gas container, and we didn't have taser. So a lot of times officers were hurt, suspects were hurt because they had to go hands-on to attempt to make a lawful arrest of a combative subject. And so with the advent of pepper spray and taser, we have seen less injuries to suspects because the taser has become highly effective. And there's some outlining incidents where tasers have been misused. But taser, the company Taser or Axon, who is the primary manufacturer of tasers, and there's one or two other ones, have built-in measures so that you can't overuse the taser device. Correct. And it's actually saved the officer from getting hurt, the suspect from further injury. With pepper spray, you spray it, it takes effect. You rinse the eyes. That's part of that mandated rescue. We call in to rinse the eyes. With the taser, you have 2 barbed fishing hooks, for lack of a better word. And we can either call rescue or we can remove it on the scene. And if we need to have immediate medical care, you know, our rescue here in Horry County is some of the best around. So we can get there quickly. But that has reduced the amount of injuries that we've seen with suspects and arrests.
Okay.
There's a lot more steps before we get there. You jumped almost to the top third of the force continuum that we teach. And let's break it down to the base level is what we call officer presence. You know, when we show up and the badge is there and the patch, and they know that the police are there. That is the very first part of it. But then there are the verbal commands. And we train so much on trying to use good verbal tactics. We call it verbal judo, for lack of, I mean, that's just the term that's been coined by our academy, so that we can try to use words to bring someone to cooperate with us instead of having to use force. But if words don't work, and you know that sometimes they don't, then we get to the next steps, which is when we actually have to put our hands on them. And like Chief Hill just said, when we have to get close enough and put our hands on someone, the risk to us goes up, exponentially, and to that person that we're having to deal with. So we have soft, empty hands control. We have hard, empty hands. And then we get to the intermediate weapons. And then finally, at the end of it, is the use of deadly force. So within the realm of what we have at our disposal, there's a lot of different tools that we use to try to effect an arrest. And it's not just some type of a weapon, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. There's a comment in the stream coming from a viewer. And this was also going to be kind of a second part to what the question that I asked. And the thought behind this question is also about public perceptions and public knowledge of definitions that may be, I guess, specific to law enforcement. And there might not be a general public understanding of, what constitutes a need for a particular action whenever something is happening in a situation. So, when you look at footage and you see what apparently is, well, it may not be apparent. Maybe it's resisting arrest versus not resisting arrest. When you see images that are defined as a hostile threat versus non-threatening action. A lot of times people have their perceptions and their thoughts about what those things mean versus what law enforcement has defined. And so the one comment that comes from one of our viewers is about the incident in Atlanta, for example. It may not be comparing apples to apples, but when you look at an Atlanta situation versus a Minneapolis situation, or even if you look at just the Atlanta situation, which you all know what happened in Atlanta with the gentleman sleeping in the parking lot at Wendy's. The comment that comes through tonight is, could possibly the officer have used a different type of force, meaning, shot the person in the leg if that was even necessary? Why would, I guess, the taser pose a threat to the officer immediately? There's so many things that are wrapped around what resisting and non-resisting is all about, and also how an officer is supposed to respond in any particular moment. So what are officers trained to do in terms of reacting to situations? And how can those things, I guess, become more clear to the public, especially when we're not seeing all of the angles, or what we're seeing makes it appear as if the officer is using excessive force?
Well, I'll start off just by saying any use of force is always going to be very ugly, because you think about a football game, just the violence of those collisions and how brutal it is. Anytime we put our hands on somebody, it's not going to look like you might think they do for scripted things on television. So it's always going to look very bad. But we have different things that we train for. We have passive and passive resistance. And you've seen this demonstrated during the sit-ins. Okay, now, are we going to use any type of applied force in that other than grabbing and carrying a person out of the way or into custody? That's the only force that would be applied there. But the next level of force would be where someone's trying to flee. If they're just trying to get away, and that's all, no other factors, our force options are slightly different. Now, all of these things are evaluated. The case law we look at and the things that we have to consider is the seriousness of the offense. What type of resistance are we seeing? So if they're just running away for a relatively minor offense, then you might not see any level of force used other than just trying to catch them and put your hands on them. But when you get to the level of what we saw in Atlanta, and again, I don't know enough of the facts. I haven't seen all the video. I know there's video released, but I haven't been able to watch all of it at one time. There was a weapon involved with that taser. So that is going to escalate in their minds the need to do something different. And if you see, they did start off talking to him. They then tried to use their hands. They did try to use their tasers. And ultimately, they felt like, and again, this is their decision, and I don't have all the facts, they felt like deadly force was what was warranted at that point in time. So you see kind of that progression of them trying to use different tactics. But one thing that is probably the biggest thing that I have to do when we have complaints come in about officers, even on traffic stops and demeanor and things like that, is most of them don't understand the law and why we do what we do. And there's a high level of just an educational component. So one thing that we try to do is I try to invite people to come inside, be part of our Citizens Police Academy. You get to see this stuff from the inside. You get to see it demonstrated. You get to see it in practice. You get to start learning the vocabulary and the vernacular of what we do. You get to see us apply it, and you get to, and some of the things you actually get to participate and do some of the skill drills that we do to help prepare you. So coming into a police department and saying, I want to learn more, is a very good first step for somebody who wants to get educated about why we do the things we do.
Yeah, I'll have to concur with Chief Long. We've got a Citizen Police Academy. I think most agencies in the Grand Strand have them. They're a great way for the taxpayers to, one, understand where their money is going to, and what training that the officers are involved in. And there's great dialogue back and forth from a diverse group that's in our Citizen Police Academy, and they're exposed to these situations. We even put them in a scenario with our shoot, don't shoot decision-making simulator. Mm-hmm. It's an eye-opening experience. You're put into a firsthand simulated event, and you have to make a decision within a matter of seconds. And that decision is to protect your life and the life of others. And you talk about a fleeing felon or a fleeing assailant. You have to factor in all those decisions. And then afterwards, you have to articulate to a supervisor and perhaps to a jury why you did what you did. And you have to live with that situation the rest of your life.
And I guess a lot of, what we're talking about definitely is leading into, the questions of training and what types of training the police officers are receiving prior to joining even your departments, from the academy. And of course, you aren't responsible or don't know anything about the training they may have received prior to that if they have previous police experience. But it does bear the question as to whether or not the training situations that they're in give them more realistic situations, such as, combat type of training, or is it all scenario based and, in modules and things that they can't really see or feel from the standpoint of being in the midst of the action. And someone's commenting training is not the issue. Training is the issue because there's different types of training. There's not only just the physical training that's involved, there's also the training from the standpoint of community awareness and cultural sensitivity and interpersonal skills and all these things that actually create that comprehensive profile of who an officer should be. And so, can you outline for us what types of training, and we'll talk about it from a local standpoint, South Carolina even, what types of training officers are subject to, and whether or not it does include comprehensive cultural diversity training and community relations training, because, it's one thing to be able to handle a firearm, to understand what issues you may encounter and how to deal with them or de-escalate them. But it's another thing to understand how to use other skills and attributes inside of those situations so that it doesn't turn into a tragic situation. Knowing how to talk to people and deal with people and understanding cultural differences. So is that type of training in place as well?
Yeah, the state of South Carolina has a curriculum, and it's available to the public to look at, and it goes over, several different factors. One is ground fighting techniques which is the hand-to-hand combats, joint locks, non-deadly force type of maneuvers to effect a lawful arrest. You also have your verbal de-escalation skills. And then when you get to the street, and each individual agency is different, around the Grand Strand, we run what they call a crisis intervention training, de-escalation training, where you put yourself in the minds of someone who's going through crises, whether it's mental illness, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's stress from losing a job or a relationship. We often encounter folks who either want to commit suicide or do harm to themselves or other. And, we're trained to stretch out that situation, talk these people off a ledge, and sometimes literally. Just 2 years ago, we talked a young man off a bridge, and to get that person some help. And when you talk about cultural sensitivity, we have in-service twice a year. So that's where we bring officers back in from the street, and they have to, prove that they can still operate a firearm, still do what they call defensive tactics. And then we try to vary the training to cover, what's relevant in the community, whether it's sensitivity, de-escalation, crisis intervention, cultural awareness. And that's that ongoing training that an officer received for his or her entire career.
Okay. Thank you so much for those responses. We just got another text from somebody who alluding to the Atlanta situation again. They said that they thought that it was determined that taser was not a lethal weapon. So where was the imminent danger in that case of Atlanta? Could you elaborate on that? You may have explained it in a roundabout way a few minutes ago, but did you hear what the question was?
Yeah, so the taser can be a deadly weapon. And let me explain. Now, again, I didn't watch the video from Atlanta, but here's where an officer could articulate where it could be a danger to his or her safety. So a suspect grabs a taser and uses it against the officer. So what a taser does, it actually has two purposes. You can do pain compliance, or you can do what they call muscular incapacitation. So the two darts that come out of a taser, they connect to the body, they create a circuit, and it locks that person up for a 5-second ride. Within that 5 seconds, you have lost all mobility in your muscles, all major motor functions. So while that officer is down, if he or she is hit with that taser, that suspect has access to that firearm. And so then it becomes a deadly force issue against the officer. Now, again, I didn't watch the video from Atlanta. I've heard bits and pieces about it. But that's one of the ways that taser that we use on a regular basis can be turned into a deadly weapon.
That's correct. I will second that. When we have a combative person resisting arrest, we don't want to get into a hand-to-hand fight with them because, first of all, you don't know what their skills are. I mean, you may be going to get someone who is extremely well-versed in mixed martial arts or boxing skills, or they're just really, really good at fighting. So that taser gives us that reactionary gap that we can stand back and we can use it. And once they're under the power of that incapacitation, it gives us that 5-second gap that we can come up and try to, while they're under the power of the interference, get them in handcuffs. So it gives us that window where they're not able to fight so that we can do it. So if that's applied to us, we are not immune to it. If someone were to take our taser and to deploy it against us for that same 5-second duration, they could do anything they want to us while we're unable to defend ourselves.
Okay. So I guess, Brother Edward, we definitely have a lot more questions that we need to get to, and I don't want us to get bogged down in the Atlanta situation, right. Even though, it's a fresh incident, it's thing, there are lots of questions that people have about it, and it's already been said that, they don't have all the facts, and they probably can't speak on it because they are Horry County and City of Conway. Let's deal with some local stuff. Let's go back to community relations here, because we definitely need to understand what we need to do in our community, and then how this all can actually, create some extensions out into other communities should people choose to put the time and energy into it. You might, some of the concerns that have come across the desk are all about community policing, community relations issues, whether or not we have officers with appropriate skills and qualifications in appropriate positions. And if so, what is that vetting process to make sure that we have the right people policing our communities? One of the things that has come up, and Brother Edward and I were actually talking about this last week prior to the show last week, is the idea that if there are more Black officers, for example, on our police forces, will that actually help in the communities to de-escalate situations or to improve sensitivities and community relations? And I don't know what the demographic composition is of your police forces, but number one, what is the demographic composition of your police forces? Number two, going into recruitment, in terms of your recruitment efforts, I know it has been tough because we've had these conversations before, but what is happening from a recruitment standpoint to make sure that we in the Black community actually see our faces on the police forces as well? And so we'll start with those two questions and then kind of move into some other things as far as community relations are concerned.
Well, I can tell you, before I came to Horry County, I was the HR manager for Fairfax County, Virginia, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C., which is very diverse, as you well know. We struggled in Virginia to recruit qualified applicants of color for various different reasons. I had two young men at a community meeting last week. I met with about 7 ministers to talk about these very same issues. And one of the ministers brought his grandson and his grandson's best friend, and they were 24 and 26 years old, respectfully. And so once they had a chance to dialogue with me, I asked a question, because these are very articulate young Black men. You can tell they were raised in a good home, well-educated. And I says, hey, we're hiring. I got an application for you. If you meet the grade of an Horry County police officer and you've got to pass a series of screening processes, I would love to offer you an opportunity to change the culture from within. And that's one of the reasons I got into policing. And to a person, they said absolutely not. They want nothing to do with law enforcement. They had no issues with law enforcement, but they don't want to become a police officer for various reasons. One was they've got to live in the community that they police. They didn't find law enforcement desirable. They had spent a lot of money on education, so they wanted to pursue a tech field, and we hear that a lot. Our starting salary is about $40,000, and if you're a cyber security specialist or IT specialist, you're talking $60,000 to $70,000. So we run into immense challenges recruiting recruits of color, male and female. And we always rely on the community to identify those folks that want to be police officers, that meet the qualifications. And then, Edward and I, we've had some serious discussion about that. There is a criteria to become a Horry County police officer, just like it is a Conway police officer. You got to pass the background check. You can't have any felonies on a record. That's a state requirement. You got to pass a psychological exam. Everyone in the state of South Carolina has to go through a psychological exam. Horry County Police, we issue polygraphs. You got to pass a polygraph, and then you got to pass an interview with me. And I will only accept the best of the best into the agency. And so we don't take everybody that applies. Probably about 8% are accepted into the ranks. And we hope they all pass, but occasionally we have folks that fail out at the academy level. So recruiting the right people is key to a lot of the trouble you see in the United States. I think we enjoy a great relationship down here in our community because we recruit the best of the best. And I think the Southern culture is different down here. We don't have a lot of race issues. We don't have a lot of community complaints about the way we police. We're not perfect. We do receive complaints, but not as much as in the big cities that we have a lot of trouble. So, yeah, we would love to see more people of color in our profession. We want to mirror the community we serve, but you've got to get them in the door for the price that we're willing to pay them.
You know, I know we don't have those issues here, like you mentioned in bigger cities, but I think we should take this opportunity and we should be working on some. And I'm not saying that you're not doing this, but some proactive strategies to make sure that we don't in the future, because Horry County is one of the fastest growing areas, okay, correct, in the United States, and any kind of proactive measures would probably be welcome right now to make sure that you've learned lessons from the bigger cities that are having those kind of issues right now. But again, I'm not saying that you don't have those implemented, but I'm saying that I think those kind of things should be pushed for. And in those cities, I thought I read somewhere where they're considering some kind of affirmative action program, okay? Because the words that I don't want to quote somebody, but it said that something has to be done, quote unquote. I don't know what it was, but something has to be done to make sure that our police and community relations have gotten better, and to have more people of color, to have more Black policemen on the force to make sure that they're visible in the Black community. I think that's important, and obviously there was a poll that was taken out, and that poll came in favor of that, and it was for that reason. And now, having said that, one of the questions that came up was that how would if the situation was reversed, for example, now I got to get back to the George Floyd situation. Okay, I know you won't beat a dead horse to death, but had that been a Black officer with the white victim, can we conclude that the situation would have been handled better or differently, not better? So you don't think so?
No, because I think that's an individual decision by that officer. Yes. And I would even throw in another dynamic. What if that was a white guy on the ground and a white officer doing the same thing they did? Why should anything be different?
Yeah.
That officer should face discipline, prosecution. He murdered a human being in front of us. Color doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. I'm sure most people agree with that. But it just happens so that cameras, a videotape that's been shown for the past number of years, have always been a white officer and the Black victim, so to speak. Surely that has brought about a discussion in some of these capacities or entities. They're saying that, should we look at that, and have a huge debate on that and see if that can be corrected, and obviously it's not going well in the Black community.
So what I would ask the audience, and I do this at community meetings, what would you want to see different in recruiting police officers of color?
And that's a good question. Please post your comments.
Yeah.
What would you want to see differently?
And understanding what we're talking about here today, do you understand how much more challenging it's going to be tomorrow than it was yesterday? With all these conversations that are coming out, it is going to be increasingly more and more difficult to recruit any candidate. And it doesn't matter about the diversity of the candidate at all. It is any candidate. It is so challenging. I've been the chief of Conway for just over 2 years. And have been with the city of Conway for just over 10. We have never been at full staff. We cannot recruit and retain the qualified officers that we want to be able to have in our community. You asked a question a moment ago, and just to tell you a little bit about how we try to make sure that we're watching this stuff, the accountability. We are required on our mid-level supervisor level, and because we do have access to the technology now, the body cameras, the in-car cameras, they have to spot check and watch videos of every officer every single month. I'm doing the same thing. I spot check and look at officer videos. I want to make sure that when they represent this police department, they're representing us and the city of Conway well. So the way they talk, the way they explain, how they are able to communicate, to make sure that the officer, first of all, is using the right skills and the right tactics. What training needs do we have? Are there issues that maybe we didn't equip that officer well enough so that we can prepare them so that things don't happen? But there is a quality control that is being done behind the scenes every single day with what is done in this department and in the departments in our area here.
And let me just piggyback on what Chief Long says. So we have a program in place called IA Pro and Blue Team. And so I brought that program on about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now. And what it is, it's an early warning system. So Joe Hill is a young patrol officer, and he gets complained on a few times. Could be minor complaints, rude and unprofessional conduct. It may be roughing up a prisoner. It could be something other minor, being late for court or missing court. That goes into a database. A red flag is issued. That's what we call a red flag. And it prints out a report for commander review, internal affairs review. And what it says basically is, hey, grab Joe Hill by the shoulder. He's going down the wrong path, and get that young man or woman some help. Either retrain them or get them out of the profession, because we're starting to see a trend develop. And if you go back to Minneapolis, and I don't know this to be true, I've heard the rumors. I understand that perhaps that one officer had 17 complaints on him. So that's egregious to me.
Yes.
Now, you've got to peel back the layers on that complaint, but I guarantee you he or she would have never gotten to 3 complaints down here in Horry County, because, we can ill afford to have someone on our department that's going to tarnish the badge and the reputation of our respective agencies.
Now, does that go back to the HR department of that police department or to the chief?
Well, here's a couple of layers, because once a complaint is issued, it's got to be reviewed, initial inquiry by a supervisor, and then depending on the severity of the complaint, it works its way up to the chain through professional standards, internal affairs, and then to Dale's desk, my desk, for decision. But here's a layer we don't have to deal with in the state of South Carolina that I think is a huge factor in all of this. Minneapolis is not a right to work state, if I remember correctly. Right. So they have unions, they have FOPs, and those unions, right or wrong, they were brought up to protect the worker. But you can't have a union intervening in a decision that, Chief Long has to make for the betterment of his community and for his agency. If Chief Long decides to dismiss an employee, it's with the right purpose. Well, a union will come in and says, no, you can't get rid of that guy or girl. You got to give them another chance. It hinders that what they call good discipline and order.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have that as a dual purpose as well. It comes up through our internal chain. But then, yes, that does go over to our city side, so that our HR department at some level would be involved in that. And we also have an early warning system. We're getting ready to install a new trackable system that's a little bit more technology friendly and updated. But we've had what we call a personnel early warning system in place for years. And it is, again, it's looking for those little triggers that shows us that there is something happening, and either there needs to be some training done, there needs to be some discipline brought, or hey, you're not the right fit for us anymore. And it's becoming readily apparent because you keep having these same issues over and over, and we will dismiss the employee if needed.
What's the likelihood that particular employer, before they're actually being too much, could move from City of Conway to Horry County Police?
Well, I think Dale had alluded to this earlier. If that employee is dismissed, every dismissal, retirement, or separation from an agency has to be reported to the academy. Correct. So the Criminal Justice Academy of the state of South Carolina is the clearinghouse for all of those separations. And if that separation was due to disciplinary, there's a process to decertify a police officer. That police officer has a right for an appeal process. We're involved in 1 or 2 of those appeal process now. And we go before a panel, and a panel at the academy will make a decision whether that person's certification is pulled permanently or reinstated.
Okay. Elaborate on, you want to say something, April?
No, go ahead. I'll hold it.
Yeah. With the funding, I read something, I guess it was recently, about the amount of funding that each of your respective departments had gotten from the federal government. I think in your case, Chief Long was $250,000 for hiring more officers. And in your case, Chief Hill was 1.2 million, something like that.
Yes, that's 15 officers.
For 15, I thought it was 16. Okay, for 15 officers. Is that enough? I'll just bluntly ask. Is that enough in both of your cases?
No. Well, I'm using the smaller number since we only have 2. But even that amount of money, that is a funded grant position for 3 years, and it phases and gets lower and lower towards the 3rd year, and then it goes away. And the city of Conway's contribution to that grant up front is less, but then at the back end of it, we will end up having the most part of it. And after the 3rd year, the employees are ours and we have no more federal funding. But it gives us the opportunity to start a program with a couple of new officers now that gives us the little kickstart to the extra budgetary money that's there. And for us, again, it's real simple. I've asked for 2. We were granted both positions. One is going to be a youth engagement officer that's going to be tasked with working with our school resource officers and kind of bridging all the schools. They're going to be working with our sports and recreation department, which is a place that a lot of kids go after school, so that they're having that contact with them. They're going to be involved in our camp. They're going to be involved in our Explorers program. So we're kind of bridging the day where we go from having interaction during the school year with the kid from, say, 7:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon. With that engagement officer, they might take that till 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. So again, having more positive role model interaction with police officers, some at school, and then some actually in a sports type environment to where it is very non-confrontational, help to build the relationships, help to divert kids from out of the system. And then my other one is going to be on the opposite spectrum. You know, our senior adult population is moving, increasing here. We've got some things we're going to do with them as well. So that part of the funding does not anywhere come close to fixing any staffing or needs elements that we have, but it's a help. And we're glad to have any help we can get.
So, are you? I know that the funding allocation from the Department of Justice is for hiring, pretty much. But are you all able to advocate for more resources that can actually be pumped into training or community-based initiatives?
Well, Chief Hill,
that's coming. Yeah. I think we're going to see some real action from the administration on community engagement and supporting the mission that, you know, Chief Long and I have been involved in since we entered into policing. So what I'm hopeful is that, you know, this whole defund the police and divert those resources to mental health, public health, and education. You know, I support all of that. What I don't support is defunding the police to achieve that goal. You know, you talk about, you know, the federal government has different projects and pork belly projects and pork barrel projects. Divert some of that money into helping the communities out that we have to police every day. And so if you've got mental health, because our mental health safety net in the state of South Carolina is deficient. We serve as that intermediary many times, law enforcement does, and we're not clinicians. You know, we're law enforcement officers. Education is poor. They struggle with that in certain communities in the state of South Carolina and across the country. And then, of course, healthcare is poor. So, you know, but by bolstering those community improvements helps us out, because then you don't have a community in crisis like we do all across this country, and in particular communities of color.
And then you add 2 other things to what he just said. You talk about homelessness, and you talk about substance abuse and addiction issues. You know, we're the gatekeeper at 3 a.m. that's trying to find a place for someone to stay, or for someone to get into some type of crisis management, some type of counseling. You know, when We went through the really bad recession back in the late 2000s, and all those programs on the mental health side got cut. They've not been restored. And we're being tasked, like Chief Hill said, on a daily basis of going to people in crisis. We get a lot of training through the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So the officers have a skill set to be able to try to identify so we can communicate better. But until law enforcement can get those things off of their plate, such as trying to deal with the mental illness, trying to deal with the homeless issue, trying to deal more with addictions and abuse. And the hospital system will tell you exactly the same thing. They're dealing and overwhelmed at the emergency departments, just like we are on the law enforcement side. We will be able to engage our communities better when we don't have so many things that we're responsible for. So do not defund, fund the right things to the right levels, but the amount of funding that we need to be able to then properly invest into our communities would then be closer to being sufficient.
And so, April, let me ask you a question. So, this topic of defunding the police comes up and has come up in the last 2 weeks. And I'm not putting you on the spot, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, someone, God forbid, is breaking into your home. Are you going to call a social worker? Or are you going to call a trained uniformed police officer to save you and your family, perhaps? And so that's the question.
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, I don't think that defunding the police is realistic, and I think it's counterproductive. I do agree with what Chief Long was saying about the fact that there may need to be an overhaul of some things or a reallocation of resources for things that take precedence or that deserve the priority, because I'm actually kind of baffled as to why public safety is not getting the funding that it needs. It is public safety. So, why is it even a tug of war or such a, I guess, a hard process for you all to receive the monies that you need? Because, of course, there's going to be some shortfalls in the community if you don't have what you need. Everything is relative. There's a domino effect. If you aren't paying these officers enough money to put their lives on the line every day and every night and do what they need to do, then there's some things that are going to fall by the wayside, whether we want to believe it or not, because there's going to be a level of frustration that sets in when that personal, those personal conditions start to conflict with those professional conditions. It's just like with anybody else. If you don't have enough money to pay the bills, you're going to be frustrated going to work every single day, and everything is going to tee you off no matter what if you can't keep the lights on. So, maybe redirecting money into salaries so that there's more employee satisfaction, and hopefully that will lead to more morale and the feeling that, there is some value in what they do. The other part of it has to do with, I did the Citizens Police Academy a few years ago. And how many? I mean, 2 years, 2 years. Was it 2 years? Yeah, I did that. And I saw firsthand what the officers had to deal with every single night that I went out on a ride out with the police officers. And Chief Long is correct. There are some things that just, I could not believe you have to deal with from the standpoint of what you do every day when you hit the street. I think that, this entire program today, it definitely is about the community relations focus and, wanting people to understand, what all you have to do every single day to make it happen. But I think there needs to be another level of understanding in the public in order to get over the stigma that you all are facing. Because if the stigma does not go away, it's going to make recruitment and even retention much harder for you along the way. So the conversation here today, and I'm saying this for the viewers as well, it's not to tackle the issues that are happening outside of our natural borders. It's to talk about, because they don't have all those facts to even address those things. We're not talking to lawyers. We're talking to police officers who know the law. But there again, if they don't have all of the information based upon what's seen in the media, the little bit that we're getting, we're not going to have an educated conversation here. We're just going to continue to fuel fires here. So, this conversation needs to be about the community relations factors that we face in our community, the things that probably are are now at the forefront because of a George Floyd situation that we don't want to happen in Horry County. We don't want to see that in the city of Conway. So, you know, if you're going to use your energies to ask these officers some questions about how they are making sure that their officers are trained to you know, meet the needs of the community and not make Conway, South Carolina or Horry County a Minneapolis kind of a situation. You know, and again, I don't know what all they're facing, but what I do know is that the questions that I have that all relate back to how policing happens in the community, I think there needs to be more communication and more discussions with the community to understand we're the ears on the street. So if you're not hearing from us, then that's a major part of policing that is missing. So, you know, are there task force or other committees in place other than the Citizens Police Academy where people can feel vested in the policing process? You know, is that something that can be considered? You know, when it comes down to even recruitment, there are people who are majoring in criminal justice every day, not just at our technical colleges, but at HBCUs and other universities. You know, maybe you have it in the budget to go to these places and recruit. Maybe you don't. But, you know, there could be a network that could be developed to help with these recruitment practices. But it's still going to be hard if people don't understand the culture of what we're dealing with in Horry County. You know, the challenges that they face. And this program it was designed to educate people on these particular things. So, you know, to answer your question, if somebody breaking in my house at 3 o'clock in the morning, they gonna meet Betty at the door. Okay, I'm just gonna say that they're gonna meet Betty at the door. And the bottom line is, yes, I would call a police officer if need be. I mean, that's what anybody would do. But the fact that you don't have proper staffing in other areas, it just baffles me, because how can you do your job effectively if you don't have the resources, you know, that you need? So someone asked about the salaries, and you know, I get that the salaries are, you know, an issue. But, you know, how do you overcome that? I mean, is there nothing that can be done as far as even the funding? Who's talking to the Department of Justice to let them know what you all need?
I mean, that's going to be a council decision, at least for Horry County. I can't speak to Dale decision.
Okay, so those are the kinds of things we need to know, because if council is the driving force behind it, then council needs to know from the citizens that what the police departments need would be funding that could be put into salaries so that you all can retain good, high quality officers, and you don't have to have recycled officers, or you don't have to, you know, worry about whether or not you're getting an officer who's prepared for the job, because you're getting young officers who are not being paid enough, and they're just happy to have, you know, happy to be on the force. So there you have it. We need to talk to council. And for you, it's county council, right? For you, it's city council, correct?
July 6th, I have my next city council meeting. We just had one tonight. So I need you to come as passionately as you have to articulate this, because there's the competing interest across all of what the city does, that the grab for all of the dollars that we have in the budget. Every person in the city wants something different, and they want their need funded. So it's tough for us to compete sometimes, but we're doing the best we can.
There you have
an issue.
April's presence. Look, at the council meeting, but we have a text from one of our community leaders who asks us, what would you all like for the community to do to help in any of these areas?
Yeah.
Well, here's what I struggle with. I've been here for 3.5 years. And we've had several community meetings out in Longs and Cedar Branch and Poplar area. And I'll bring 7 or 8 officers out so you could see diversity in the agency. You have sector officers, and I'll have 4 or 5 community members show up. And that gets frustrating after a while, because I know there's many more people out there that have questions, concerns. And so I want to see that room packed with folks so we can have this meaningful dialogue. Now, I will entertain and talk and answer every question from those 4 people, but how much more impactful would it be with 40 people or 140 people that live in that community? So what I would ask my community to do is get out and have a conversation with us. We have these meetings on a regular basis. We advertise them on our social media. The churches partner with us and advertise these meetings. Get out if you have concerns, or if you just want to support us. We love you too. Come on out and let's have a conversation.
And you forgot one shout out earlier to Sugar Hill.
Yes, Capital Conway.
All right. Now, that is exactly the dynamic we're talking about. If I have a community meeting from, say, Wild Wing, I'll have 25, 30, 40 people show up. But if I ask for my Sugar Hill Crime Watch area to come, I'll be lucky if I get 3 or 4.
And that's for real. That's for real.
So
that's for real.
They have the ability to come and to have my ear, to tell me what their needs are, to tell me what they're seeing, tell me what they need. And they do not take advantage of the opportunity like other areas do.
Okay, and Horry County is not alone in that man. That's all over the state.
I know.
It's everywhere, but like I said, we're talking about home right now.
You know,
I mean, it does happen everywhere.
Yeah, it correlates with the income area, you know, and I don't know why. People have many rationales for that, but there's a correlation there with income or relative to presence at police meetings and stuff like that. Even PTA meetings, I understand.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what we've done. So one of our deputy chiefs had a concept, and we put it into play, and we developed a entertainment trailer, cook trailer, and we partnered with Mr. Softy of Myrtle Beach. And so we'll go to some of these communities and we'll advertise in advance, but we take seizure money from drug seizures, and we buy hot dogs and hamburgers and ice cream for the kids. And, you know, we're there so the kids can see us in a non-adversarial mode, and they get to get on the motorcycles and jump in the car and play with the lights and talk to us. And these are children, and we want them to feel comfortable communicating with us. God forbid they'll ever need us and have to call us, but they have to know that they can count on us.
Yes.
And we have adults that come out, and, you know, I hate to say it, we bribe them with food and backpack giveaways and other things, and that's fine. If I can get them to the table, we can have a conversation and break bread, then we're a better community for it.
Yeah, well, if that's what it takes, man, you just create a budget to do that. I mean, you know, if that works, you know, do what we have to do. You know, if food is what brings them there, food is what attracts them there, then, you know, is that very difficult to implement something like that?
No, we use our seizure money. Yeah. And we can use money that are donated. We have a lot of money. I say a lot of money. We have money that's donated to the police department.
Yeah, and
then we'll use that to buy hamburgers and hot dogs and do different things. And I'm sure Dale has some of the same things, but it's whatever it takes to connect with our community.
Yes.
Yeah,
we have a basketball league. So we have in the spring, we get our kids come in for a basketball league.
Right. Yeah.
We have a camp during the summer. We have an explorers program. So we're trying to engage the kids as actively and dynamic as we can. But again, it's like as soon as that part of the activity is over and the food is gone, you know, we're there trying to engage the adults with come partner with us. And it just doesn't stick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that same person has already texted back again and says how do you communicate these meetings and put a focus on the fact that she said that they can get the numbers if you need the numbers to come out there. So,
well, we use a broad social media platform. We have Twitter, we have a Facebook account. You know, we tie any type of press release that we send out goes to our social media platform as well as to all of our media outlets in the area. So it's very widely broadcast, same as what Chief Hill does. So the information, unfortunately, there's not been many right now simply because of, you know, social distancing and, you know, threat of the coronavirus. It's completely changed. I mean, we had to cancel our basketball league this past spring because of the illness. We had We've not been able to manage a camp this summer because of it. Schools aren't open and available for us to use the space. So it's very, very different now. I'm ready for this part of it to pass so we can have the community come back in, even something as simple as just coffee with a cop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that how are you as far as connecting with churches? Are you giving that information out to the church leaders and asking them to make it a part of their weekly announcements?
Yeah, so what we recognize is that not everybody is connected to our social media platforms. So one of the best ways we found, especially out in the western part of the counties, is to get those established groups out there, those organizations, churches, those community groups, to go ahead and host a meeting, and we'll show up. And then if we have to, bring food, and sometimes we have giveaways, we give away Ring cameras, and we talk about the benefit of having a camera system at your house and your residence, and how do you connect that with the Neighbors app, which is a virtual neighborhood watch. And so we find it very beneficial when the churches host or community group host it. You get more of a buy-in that way.
I'm not being facetious, but that's also, when you start talking about a higher level of technology, that's kind of intimidating to a certain age group.
Sure.
And that centers around a typical church member, okay, which today is not your typical teenager or your young person, okay.
But
there is that word of mouth too, as community members share that.
They still look at the paper. They still look at the paper, and it goes out.
Right. Yeah, there's still ways to get it out, and even if you have to go grassroots and direct mail, you have to do what you have to do. You have to be creative. And now that we're in a time of, virtual meetings and things like this, even if you had to, create meetings and virtual platforms, I think people are getting more comfortable with it, and it's a way to do it. But and one person has made a comment and has been commenting a lot on this thread here, says stop using the churches. I don't think we can stop using the churches, because whether we want to believe it or not, that is the largest collective body of Black people at any one given time is in the church. So what we have to make sure is happening in the church, in my opinion only, it could be, I don't care if it isn't anybody else's opinion, we have to make sure our pastors are on board to help disseminate that information, whether it's developing a committee of some sort at the church, or someone who's just so highly interested in making sure this information gets out, that they're making sure that the information gets to the church. When is there another time when Black people are together other than family reunions and cookouts, but church?
And funerals.
So you have to use church. We can't stop using the church as a platform for communication. During the Civil Rights Movement, that was our foundational piece, the church. So if we stop using the church, we won't have a way to communicate some of the things that we need to communicate to people. It's one option. It's one option, and we have to definitely use all options to make sure that everybody gets the message. Because you're right, we can't assume that everybody's on social media, because they're not. And especially our older residents, they're just starting to embrace social media. The younger residents, they're not really using it for this type of thing. We're trying to get them there. And the ones in the middle, we've got it, but we're having a hard time actually getting everybody on board as well. So we all meet on common ground, which is church. And I think that, just make sure that's in your mix as well. One person, there's another comment real quick. Talks about building trust. And I think building trust in the community is a big part of it. It's going to be harder to build trust, because everybody has their thoughts about, why we're not trusting the police right now. And so that goes back to the questions surrounding even police reform. Do you think that there's room for, and I'm sure you do, but how does that look? What does that look like in terms of police reform? What needs to happen at this point to make sure that you can actually gain that trust in the communities again? And, maybe it's training, maybe it's, just a zero tolerance policy for police brutality issues, whatever it is. Have you thought about what can be done to make sure that you're trying to build that trust with us again?
Well, I know that I've gotten quite a bit of email communication from different concerned citizens. They kind of have a cut and paste list of things that they say they want to see us do. And to this point, we were almost at 100% of what they were asking for. First and foremost was the removal or ceasing the use of the chokeholds. And I'm like, we don't do that. That all force must be reported. We've already done that. We've been doing that. If you do not report a use of force, that would be grounds for up to termination. If you were involved in some type of a use of force with someone and you failed to document and report that. Body cameras, we have the body camera technology that we use. And again, we're using that as part of our quality control. They're asking for increased training. I've done the survey of our department, and to a person in our department, we undergo between 200 and 250 hours of training per year. So we are always training, staying current. Case law changes, case law evolves, tactics change, things that the courts rule on. So we have to continuously change our methodology to meet the legal standards. So we're always training to stay current and to stay on the edge. So as far as the things in the community to build the trust, I just say, we're not these places that you're seeing on television. Come inside our department, be part of what we do, come ask the questions. If you're not sure about something, be educated on it, be part of the academy, come to these events. We have so many opportunities that we just open the doors and say, come be part of what we're doing and see from the inside out so that you'll know the things we do. And until we get that feedback and that buy-in to where they're doing it, it's just not going to get any better. But we're going to keep making the efforts to say, we're here. We want you to come and be a part of it.
Chief Long is absolutely right. And what I'll add to that is this. Even though this is not a problem you see in Horry County, this is an opportune time to take that energy that is developed from this horrific situation and turn it into a positive and more engagement. So perhaps those meetings that we only had 2 or 3 people show up, maybe this will be a catalyst for maybe 33 people to show up. Yeah. And so that now our community is fully engaged with us, and we need to hear those concerns. Absolutely. I did a church service at the Beach Church this past Sunday at 9:30 to 11:30, and the pastor, and Beach Church is predominantly white, and what the pastor wanted to do was have a panel of Black citizens convey their hurt, their stories about racism, and so that his congregation can understand the passion, the hurt, and the love that we have for our fellow human being. And it was a very powerful 2 sessions. I had one gentleman, I won't call his name, but you can look at the session online. He's a big fella. He's 6'4", 240 pound, outstanding military officer. And he broke down when he was talking about his 14-year-old son, perhaps interacting with law enforcement in a negative fashion and losing his life. That's powerful to me. So what I want to do is bring that gentleman in front of my officers so they understand the fear that the Black community has. So this is a catalyst we can roll on and turn what we already have as positives in Horry County into greatness.
Yes.
Yeah, right. We April started off by wondering if we should call this a forum or not. Maybe that's what it has turned into. But it's definitely needed, and I can understand where you're coming from, Chief Hill and Chief Long.
There's a question from someone. Can I interject before you go on? Is there an automatic dismissal if body cam is not on? Any recourse?
Well, there's recourse for it, but it's not an automatic dismissal because it's you cannot always know that something's getting ready to happen. I mean, if you're walking to pay for your gas at the gas station, and all of a sudden somebody jumps out at you, you're not going to have time to turn it on. That was one of the things that was in that list that they want to see the police department do, is what they call an always on body camera. Well, our body cameras, for 2 reasons, cannot accommodate that purpose. First of all, the battery life will not last a 12-hour shift. So your body camera cannot possibly stay on all the time. The battery just will not support it. And secondly is the storage capacity of what the camera will hold. It won't hold that much data. We have to download our body cameras during a shift now because it won't hold but so much data. And then the other part of the data storage is that cloud keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more expensive to maintain. So we keep our body cameras on. When we get a call for service and we're driving to it, cameras come on. When we're at some incident or some scene, cameras are on. But there is always the potential that you could be somewhere doing something and that's not why you're there, and it could turn into a critical incident that you did not have to. If an officer had to make a choice between defending himself or turning on the camera, I want him to defend himself first, and then we'll document what we did later. So that's not an automatic dismissal to not have your camera on.
Now, we have technology in the new system that we just purchased about 1.5 years ago, and it's a Body Cam 3. So, April, if you're out on patrol and you forget to turn your body cam on, and it happens, it's not intentional, but it happens. And Edward, you roll up and you turn your body camera on, it will automatically activate April's camera. Or if Chief Long rolls up and just passes by the incident and he has his lights on and his in-car video on, that in-car triggers all the other cameras on the scene to turn on. And so we can also go back and look at analytics of who routinely turns their camera on, and more importantly, who doesn't. Yeah. And so the folks that doesn't, that you know, for whatever reason, forget or choose not to turn it on, we can track that and we can discipline that. We can retrain that. And if it comes down to it, it's a disobedience of order. Then you're talking about a possible dismissal. I haven't seen that. I don't think that's something that these officers are going to engage in, because that body cam has been a lifesaver for law enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay. April mentioned earlier about the salaries of, and nobody really went and addressed the issue. Is that confidential about the starting salaries for example, Conway Police Department?
We're pretty close. I mean, I think he's just a tick higher than we are. If you come into us and by the time you get through a few benchmarks, you start off right at $38,000 as our base salary for an uncertified officer with no law enforcement career. And we do have a couple of steps in there that once you get, like I said, a couple of benchmarks, you would go up to within the first couple of years, you'd be at just over 40. And at the end of about 4 years, if you don't have any promotions in there, you'd be about 42 or 43. So there's a little bit of growth that's built into the first 4 years of your career while you're still learning, so that you're gaining the skills and the tactics that you need. You're learning a lot more, but you're also going to get rewarded with it with a little bit more before you actually would start saying, now I want to be into the supervisory roles and then those promotional roles.
Okay. And for us, it's just slightly different. Once you graduate from your FTO program, and that's when you leave the academy, you're assigned to a senior officer, and that senior officer would teach you the dynamics of the Horry County Police Department, CAD operations, report writing, the culture of the agency. Once you complete that process, it's $40,000, but there's a lot more benefits than just the base salary.
Oh, absolutely.
For Dale and for myself, I think Dale's working on take-home cars. We have take-home cars. We have insurance benefits. We have a 401k. We have an education incentive. We have psychological, family, what they call employee assistance program. There's a lot of benefits associated, not just the base salary, but everything else that goes with it. They call it the fringe benefits. And that's, what we sell it on. Not to mention, you get to come work in Horry County, whether it's, Conway or the county police department. You're at the beach. You're in a great area, low cost of living. You can get a nice house reasonably, $125,000. I mean, this is a great place to live, and you don't have to shovel snow.
The salaries, are they based on high school diploma, or do you get incentives if you have a college degree?
Well, minimum, you have to have a high school diploma in order to be qualified to get into the police academy. That's a minimum requirement.
21.
We're doing. I'm sorry.
Age 21.
Yeah, 20. It must be 21. Have a high school diploma, and then again, there's probably more things that are disqualifiers than there are things that you actually have to have. Like I said, that criminal record and those kind of things that disqualify people. But we are internally, we're working on some incentives that would recognize officers with associate's degree, bachelor's degree, maybe with a little bit of a step increase. We do not have that in place yet. But if I want to raise the caliber of officer by raising the minimum education requirements and standards, then you have to pay for that. Like Chief Hill said earlier, the couple of candidates that he tried to recruit so hard, they probably had a little bit of college debt, and they were looking for the better job to come out to pay all that stuff off than what I would be able to offer someone. So if we want to have the college to raise their base abilities, we have to have some mechanism in place to reward for it. We also have an educational incentive that we pay certain amount of money up towards your degree. That fringe package for an officer at Conway, when you include all of their insurance and other things like that, it equals out to be about a $75,000 per year package.
Okay. I don't want this to be a recruiting platform. I mean, it could be. You know.
Well, it can be, because I've got this for the right person. And I'm recruiting all the time.
All right. I hope everybody heard that. But just one last thing. What about if a new person comes to town that he or she is going to be looking for housing, you know, in certain areas, I guess, would the department in both of y'all's cases assist them, and how flexible would you be?
Without a new recruit looking for housing?
Yeah.
That's relocation assistance, isn't it?
Yeah, but we don't have a formal program. Well, what we can do, we have apartment complexes. I got a call just last week, what they call a courtesy officer program. And what they're looking for is an officer to live in the apartment complex at either a reduced rate or free rent, just to have that police car parked out front. We also can hook them up with officers in the department who are willing to share a room and a house. There's many, many different ways we can make that transition easy for them.
Chief Dale, I know you talk about the stringency of the hiring mechanism, but can you offer any kind of flexibility, or are you willing to bend just a little bit more than what the law requires for?
No.
Bend the law? You asking to bend the law?
Here's the thing. Why should we? Because what you're saying is that there's not qualified applicants of color out there, and I'm going to push back on that and say, yes, there are. We just got to get them interested in our agency and show them there's an opportunity and our door is open. So why should we lower our standards? Because all the minority officers we recruited met that high standard, and I don't think they want to work next to somebody. And there's also an obligation that if they have a criminal record, a felony criminal record, they can't hold a certification in the state of South Carolina. Backtrack
on that. I wasn't asking for to lower your standards. I'm a firm believer in having the highest of standards. Okay, for any profession, because that impacts everybody. Okay.
Agreed.
But I was asking maybe if there was any flexibility at all, that if you would look at one a good quality of a candidate and look at his or her bad quality and make a decision and say, if you have that kind of discretion to say, well, maybe his or her good qualities may outweigh this, even though they're both don't fit I guess, for lack of a better word, requirements.
Sure. I'll give you a prime example. We've had recruits that have tried marijuana, let's say 2 years ago while they're in college, and that comes across my desk. I have to make a decision. Was that a one-time thing? Was that experimental? And, can I trust that recruit not to partake in narcotics again as they wear the badge? And so with the psychological background and then the polygraph, I've made decisions to say, I'm going to give you a chance. So, we can be flexible within reason, and it's on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, agreed.
Okay. All right. That's my issue.
Well, the only thing we haven't talked about, and can we spend maybe 5 minutes on it? Of course, the demonstrations that have happened across City of Conway, Horry County, and there's some people who decided to assemble and raise their voices about the incident surrounding George Floyd's death. And, you know, there was a lot going on one weekend. It seems like, you know, there were demonstrations, you know, from one corner to the next. You know, do you believe that the messages in those demonstrations were clear? And, you know, what are some things that you want organizers to know if they're, and I'm sure there will be future protests or demonstrations, but what do you want organizers to know as far as the role that law enforcement wants to intentionally play in these demonstrations?
Well, it's part of that educational process that when you come to do some type of a protest, your first thought is, this is what I want to do. But you don't understand that a byproduct of that could be someone who disagrees with your point of view might come against you. And we could end up with a situation, if we were not prepared, where a group that was advocating A had the detractors and the opponents that were advocating B, and we're trying to help both of them with their First Amendment rights of that free speech and that peaceful assembly, and they might be literally on the same grounds as almost as adversaries. So most people wouldn't think that anybody would come against them, but we have to be prepared that could happen. So we're going to have to ensure that there's going to be safety for any person who is there at that venue. So we must have a presence. We do not dictate anything other than we just kind of want to know your plans so we can be prepared and flexible to help you meet your goal of what you want to do as safely as possible, while we're assuming some of that risk of trying to look for what could potentially be the negative effect of it. So far, they have gone fantastic here. They've had great opportunity to get their voice out. They've registered voters. They've shared community resources with each other about things that are available. And I agree. When I pinned on my first badge and I raised my hand, it was to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And I fully support their constitutional right to get out here and say things. And even though when I hear them talking about hands up, don't shoot, that doesn't happen here. I know that's other places, but the pain and the reality of it is that it affects every community. And even though I know you're not talking about us, we're going to be here for you, to support you, to give you that right to do it, and to be as out. My goal is that when the event is over, they didn't even know we were there because it went so smoothly. And we don't want to be at the front. That's your place to be, so that you can have your platform to advocate your view. We want to be behind, supporting, and just as that role of your protector while these events are going on. So as they've gone, they've been very, very good. They've communicated with us well about what their expectations were, and we tried to meet those expectations.
Okay.
But one last thing, we could not have done it without the generous support of my Horry County Chief and our Horry County Sheriff, who has reached out and provided resources to us. Because on one event day, we had two events at one time and on opposite sides of town. So it kind of stretched our resources. We couldn't have done it without the help of our community. And just as a chance to shout out to our 15th Judicial Circuit, Horry and Georgetown counties. I've never worked with a group of people that communicate, that share information, that assist each other, that are there to support one another through every activity. And I know that does not happen in other places. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they have some of the issues there, is because if police can't even get along and communicate and share information and try to help each other, then maybe they're operating too much in one silo, and that's causing them to get into the problems.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, I was very proud of Chief Long, Chief Prock, Sheriff Carter Weaver down at Georgetown, Kelvin Waits. These are all police leaders that got out and were in that crowd with those folks protesting. We didn't have any protests in unincorporated Horry County. but we were fully prepared to support those protests, protect them. And, I've told people this before. I'm a black chief in the state of South Carolina because people took to their feet and protest, 30, 40 years ago. And so that's not lost on me. And so I respect the right to protest. When I was in Northern Virginia, I had to protect a protest. A group of KKK, Aryan Nation had a protest, and I was on the front line. I may not agree with your message, but I will die protecting your right to have it.
That's right.
Mm. There was one comment that came through, and I'd like for that commenter to clarify which office you sent the email to. Was it Horry County or City of Conway Police? And maybe one of the chiefs can look into whatever your complaint was. There was obviously apparently an email sent to one of your offices about a black young lady being forcefully pushed to the ground. So if you can clarify which office you actually sent that complaint to, I'm sure the chiefs would be more than happy to look into that. And I think that when it comes down to your reflections on these events, again, they'll continue to happen if the demonstrators, and especially the City of Conway, by the way, that's the City of Conway, chief. If the demonstrators and the organizers of these demonstrations continue to move with the right intent and the same energy that they had, she said she sent it to Horry County as well. So will both of you please look into it. But anyway, they will continue to happen. And just as sure as we've had that incident since George Floyd's death, there have been other things that have happened that could definitely reignite any feelings that the community has about police brutality issues. So, I think that it's important for all of us to be on the same page, to hear from you, because, what we're hearing is basically what you're putting in the universe as far as you want the community to know, what you want us to know and what you want us to believe about how you police and how you protect our communities. And I challenge everyone who was viewing tonight and making comments. One person asked, I think it was for Chief Hill, when is the next meeting? I think is it county council meeting, or there was a community meeting that you were talking about? It's tomorrow. What time? Yes,
county council meeting is tomorrow, but because of COVID, they're limiting the amount of people there. If he or she is talking about the next community meeting, they can send an email to me, and I'm on the web. And if they want to set up a meeting in their community, I'll be glad to be there along with a number of my officers.
Okay. All right. So there's always opportunity. I've always talked about the fact that the council meetings tend to happen when people are getting off work. Brother Edward, I think we've said that before to a couple of council persons, if you want to say, people are usually in traffic when these meetings are happening. Yeah. But as a community, we have to be involved comprehensively. That means not just showing up for demonstrations and things like that, but doing the work afterwards. And, we just wanted to give them a platform, meaning our police officers, to speak today, also to have your questions answered if you had any. As far as filtering the comments, they can see all of your comments. So they know the sentiments of the community, and hopefully you'll take that information and, create some other discussions with everyone who was here tonight, or, just discussions in the community in general, because these may be the sentiments of other community members as well. So, Brother Edward, that's all I have for tonight. What else? Is there anything else that you want to cover?
Opportunity just to show appreciation to some of our sponsors. Give a shout out to our sponsors who keep us going with the magazine, having us printing costs of the magazine, and our time in planning for programs like this is not easy. Okay, not one bit. So, but these people have supported us along the way. Walker Primary Care, Snag and Drag, Quick Services, Heating and Cooling, Horry County Democratic Party, Daisy Fair Flowers, on Adult Education, Big Mike's Soul Food, and McKeevil's Funeral Home, Tony McAfee at State Farm, Palmetto Chevrolet, Horry Georgetown Tech, and Ocean View Funeral Home and Cremation Services. So we'd certainly like to send a shout out to them and show our appreciation. And and appreciation to you all for being our guest today. Of course, you know, it's been more than, I don't like to use the word entertaining in something like this, as serious as a discussion as this is, but it certainly has been thought provoking and for everybody. And I think both of you have displayed a lot of professionalism in terms of what your departments are going to be doing and have done and what you're doing now. Hopefully our viewing audience could take these comments, digest them, and on a post basis, they can send us comments to our website, wcmagazine.net, and give us some more on your thoughts. And by the way, when you get on that website, that will be uploaded as a video of this, and you can see in full how the conversation went with our guest today, who were Conway Police Department Chief Dale Long and our Horry County Police Chief, Mr. Joseph Hill. Again, I just thank you all so much. And
so, Brother Edward, I know that we haven't really confirmed just yet, but we are working on having a couple of more police chiefs on for next week. Hopefully it will happen next week.
Right.
And so, you know, it's good to get different perspectives because everybody has different experiences where they actually patrol in police. And we have to also remember that our area is such a melting pot of people because we are in a tourist area, a very transient area. So we have people who are coming here from up north who may have different perspectives from a community standpoint and even from a policing standpoint. And we have to learn how to actually listen to one another. And we also have to be willing to be vocal when it matters to be vocal. So, you know, for those of you who feel that you have raised your voice, but it hasn't been heard, let's get louder. let's make sure that somebody is listening. You can't just attend a meeting and sit there and be quiet. You got to attend the meeting and stand up when it's time to say something. And if you sent one email, send more or whatever the case is, but they won't know what's happening in the community until you actually, you know, raise your voice in that way. And then, you know, there are people who have approached me about, coming up with community programs and community ideas to, address some of these issues. And I think that, those kinds of things can happen, but it takes a lot of work. It also takes commitment, and it can't just be something that is for the moment. So, you know, for those of you who are serious about those types of things, yeah, reach out to me because I don't have time to waste, and I guess you don't want to waste your time either. So if we're going to do it, let's do it for the greater good and know that it's a long-term thing. It's not just because there was a May 25th death of someone at the hands of the police. This has to be long-term in terms of how we look at, taking care of our communities and raising our voice. So again, Chief Hill and Chief Long, thank you so much for being here this evening. Really do appreciate it, and keeping you to almost the 9 o'clock hour. But that's how we do. Sometimes we get caught up in discussions.
When you have such deep discussions like this, and by the way, we know we are aware that there are other police chiefs around, in the whole PD area and so forth. We did not pick you guys because you look good now, okay? All right.
We're probably two of the oldest, that's why.
My gosh.
It's time to go.
Senior.
Okay, so to our audience, thank you so much. Our viewing audience. And again,
someone called my name.
Next week, we hope to have some more law enforcement, focus on our law enforcement again, and hopefully have some more representatives from our law enforcement area.
Hey, Edward, real quick question. I see some comments. I didn't see them during the broadcast because I'm viewing this on my telephone, but will they be archived so we can look at them later and maybe get to some of these questions that we didn't get to?
Absolutely. They will always be posted on the Whittemore Community Magazine page. That's Brother Edward always mentions the website, but he sometimes forgets to refer back to our Facebook page. And we also have the rebroadcast posted on YouTube. But I don't think you'll see the comments there. It's just the rebroadcast of the actual video. And but you can definitely go back through the Whittemore Community Magazine page to see all the comments and questions.
Thank you. It's just WCMagazine.net, Chief Hill. Mm-hmm. Get everything there, okay? Mm-hmm. WCMagazine.net.
All right, awesome. All right, well, to everyone, thank you so much for viewing again. And this has been the Whittemore Community Magazine, and we certainly do appreciate you being here. So stay tuned for announcements about next week's show. Again, hopefully it'll be a part 2, talking to more law enforcement leaders. And so get your questions together. If you aren't going to be a part of the broadcast next Monday, or you don't know what you'll be doing, you can always send the questions to us in advance, and we'll certainly make it a part of our discussion. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Take care and God bless.
See you next week.
Thank you for watching the Whittemore Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook with your host,